Okay, students. So now we are moving on to a new topic, polarity of bonds. This is again related to covalent bonds. We will see what this is. So before we discuss polarity, try to remember what electronegativity is. You all know it is the tendency of an atom to attract electrons of a chemical bond towards itself. So there are two atoms are bonded in a covalent manner, involved in a covalent bond, and from the bond, the shared electrons can be drawn towards one atom. The ability to draw the electrons is known as the electronegativity. And in the periodic table, you all can remember, students, when you go from left to right across the period, the electronegativity increases. And when you go down the group, the electronegativity decreases. That is why out of the first 20 elements, fluorine has the highest electronegativity and potassium has the lowest electronegativity. You are familiar with all these. And we use the Pauling scale to denote values or assign values for electronegativity. Okay. So now we are going to relate this electronegativity with covalent bonds. Let's take an example. So consider the hydrogen molecule. Here, students, I will just show you all the electrons. Now you can consider this as the dot diagram, doesn't matter. Now these are the two electrons that are forming the bonds. Now these two electrons are always distributed symmetrically because the ability to attract the electrons by hydrogens is the same because they are atoms of the same element, they have the same electronegativity. So they draw the electron towards themselves with the same strength. Because of that, always these two electrons are symmetrically distributed. And it is always common to both the hydrogens. So such a bond does not have any kind of partial charges. So that means it doesn't have a polarity. But we will take the HF molecule. Now this is the HF bond. You all know fluorine has the highest electronegativity. So this is electronegativity, or I'll say electronegative atom. Whereas hydrogen is less electronegative. This is less electronegative. So because of that, although we expect the two electrons to be like that, the fluorine has the tendency to pull the electrons towards itself. So because of that, if you look at the bond, most of the times the electrons will be towards the fluorine atom. Therefore, when we denote this as a bond, we show it as a partial charge. The electrons are not completely lost. Still, there is sharing between hydrogen and fluorine. Most of the time, the fluorine is taking the electrons towards itself. So, because of that, fluorine gets a partial negative charge and hydrogen gets a partial positive charge. This is the simple delta, letter delta. So, partial positive and partial negative charge. So, that is because of the electronegativity. So, here you can see fluorine is more electronegative, hydrogen is less electronegative. Fluorine pulls the electron towards itself. Instead of being distributed symmetrically, the electrons get distributed asymmetrically. So, here asymmetric distribution of electrons. of electrons. So that gives rise to these partial charges. So then this bond is a polar covalent bond. Why? There are two poles, the positive pole and the negative pole. Those are the partial charges. Remember students, these are partial charges. That's very important. Partial charges. That is why we denote them as delta plus and delta minus. Not plus and minus. That is for ions. This is different. Still they are covalently bonded. But fluorine has a partial negative charge because it pulls the electrons towards itself. Whereas hydrogen has a partial positive charge because it gives the electrons partially to fluorine. Is that clear to you all? So this bond becomes a polar covalent bond. So this is what we say as polarity of the bond. So polarity means having delta positive and delta negative charges because of the electronegativity difference. So if the electronegativity is almost the same, exactly the same like in hydrogen or somewhat similar, then it is a non-polar covalent bond. And if the electronegativity difference is significantly high, then there will be partial charges. With that, I will move on to the next slide where we discuss some more examples. So here, when two atoms of unequal electronegativities are joined by a covalent bond. So this is the term that you have to remember. Unequal electronegativity. It gets polarized due to asymmetric distribution of electrons. I explained that to you all. Such bonds are called polar covalent bonds. So we have discussed one example. We discussed the HF bond. Delta minus, delta plus. Even if you take HCl bond, then also there is delta minus and delta plus. So you can see H has a slightly less electronegativity, whereas chlorine has a higher electronegativity. Even if you take the bond that is present in water. Now we will be discussing water again, the OH bond. Now here also this becomes delta minus, this is delta plus, OH bond. Same way if we take the NH bond. In that also nitrogen gets a negative charge, hydrogen has a delta positive charge. So you can remember students, if you remember the electronegativities, highest is fluorine, then we have oxygen, after that we have nitrogen and chlorine. So all these elements, because they have very high electronegativity values, they usually tend to pull the electrons towards themselves. So all of them are polar bonds. Even carbon chloride bond, that is also delta negative and delta positive. Carbon chloride bond. Can you all see all the bonds? I have not written all the molecules here. You can see I have denoted only the OH bond where the negative charge is on oxygen and the positive charge is on hydrogen. And here again nitrogen gets the negative charge and hydrogen the positive charge. Here also carbon gets the positive charge and chlorine gets the negative charge. So from all these examples students, in the bond the most electronegative atom has the partial negative charge and the electropositive atom or the atom with less electronegativity gets the positive charge. So as we looked at these two molecules, I told you all about hydrogen fluoride. So here also fluorine has a partial negative charge and hydrogen should have a partial positive charge. I mentioned that to you all before. It is a partial positive charge. Then again hydrochloric acid or hydrogen chloride, partial negative charge on chlorine and partial positive charge on hydrogen. And this is the order of electronegativity. So these elements get the partial negative charge and the less electronegative atom gets the partial positive charge. So with that, students, I will move on to the examples. This example, in case where two atoms of similar or slightly different electronegativities are joined by a covalent bond, the bonding electrons between those two atoms distribute symmetrically. Such covalent bonds are referred to as non-polar covalent bonds. So, as I explained before, hydrogen-hydrogen, that is similar electronegativity. Why? Both hydrogen atoms are same. So, similar electronegativity. Even if you take the most electronegative elements, oxygen, but both are oxygen atoms. So, they have similar electronegativity. Fluorine molecule, similar electronegativity. Or even nitrogen with the triple bond, these are all similar electronegativity. Electronegativity. Why? They are of the same element, atoms of the same element. Or it can be slightly different. Now, if we take a carbon-hydrogen bond, this is slightly different. Carbon-hydrogen bond. So, this is slightly different. Still, all these bonds are non-polar covalent bonds. When they belong to the same element, now hydrogen is less electronegative, these three are highly electronegative, but still they have similar electronegativity value. Because of that, they don't polarize. They are not polar bonds. They are non-polar covalent bonds. Here, there is a slight difference. Carbon and hydrogen, there is a slight difference. But still, it is a non-polar covalent bond. Is that clear to you all, students? So, that is how the polar bonds occur. When there is a high electronegativity or significant electronegativity difference, one atom pulls the electrons towards itself. Therefore, that gets a partial negative charge, delta negative. Whereas the other atom gets a partial positive charge, delta positive. And then we say that is the polarity of the bond that results in the polar covalent bond. But if there is no difference, if the electronegativities are similar or if there is a slight difference, then the bond does not become polar. So, it is a non-polar covalent bond. So, there are two main types of covalent bonds based on the electronegativities of the atoms that form the covalent bond. So, with that, now we will move on to water, where we discuss the polarity of water molecules. Consider a water molecule. You all can remember the structure, students. Now, in this, if you remember oxygen, I told you all we write the hydrogens at an angle like that so that we can symmetrically distribute the lone pairs that you already know. So, this is an angular shaped molecule. Now, in this, if you take oxygen, this is electronegative. Whereas hydrogen is less electronegative. So, what will happen? Again, here students, you don't have to use different colors. This is just for clear understanding. In this molecule again, if you see, the electrons from the OH bond will be pull towards oxygen. So because of that, oxygen will get a delta negative charge, whereas the two hydrogens will have delta positive charge. So partial positive charges on hydrogens and a partial negative charge on oxygen. So the OH bond becomes polar. OH bond is a polar covalent bond. Now in these students, if you look at the molecule, both the OH bonds, the polarity is towards oxygen. Now this side is delta positive, this side is delta negative. This is delta positive, delta negative. So with the angular shape and the way the polarity is distributed, the water becomes a polar molecule. So here not only that OH bond is a polar covalent bond, but water is a polar molecule, or we can say polar covalent compound. Polar covalent compound. So you're familiar with this property. You all know water is a very good polar solvent. That is because of this bonding nature and the polarity of the bonds. So not only that OH bond is a polar covalent bond, the way the bonds are arranged, water becomes a polar covalent compound. So from that, you all have to understand, students, there are some molecules that have polar covalent bond, but they are not polar compounds. They are non-polar compounds. We will discuss this in grade 11 in more detail. Just remember that. For example, if you take carbon tetrachloride, that is CCl4. I told you all before, CCl bond is polar, but the CCl4 molecule is a non-polar molecule. We will discuss that in the next grade. So for here, you have to remember that water molecule has polar OH bonds, and because of that, it is a polar covalent bond based on how the bonds are arranged. Is that clear to you all? So with that, I will move on to the next slide. So we have discussed polarity of bonds. Intermolecular bonds. So this is again related to water molecules. So you can still remember water, OH, and here we have delta minus, delta plus, delta plus. So this is also a positive charge. So when there is another water molecule near it, now there is a negative charge there, positive charges here. These are all partial positive charges. Delta negative, delta positive, delta negative, delta positive. So in water, when all the molecules are near one another, now this delta positive charge will get attracted to the delta negative charge because they are opposite charges. So there will be an interaction between those two charges. Similar to that, this delta positive will interact with the delta negative of another molecule. This one with another delta negative charge. So like that, all the water molecules arrange themselves so that there is interaction between molecules. So that is why we call it as intermolecular bonds. Now this is one water molecule, this is another water molecule. Between the water molecules there is a bond. Intermolecular bond. So intermolecular bonds in water. This is what they are. Can you see that? One water molecule with delta plus, delta minus and delta plus. This delta minus is attracted to the delta plus of another molecule, and that is the intermolecular bond. So if we look at the water molecule in like a three-dimensional structure, this is how they arrange themselves. Can you all see the angular shape and the interaction between all these molecules? Now this particular intermolecular bond gives rise to the many special properties of water. Now you know already the covalent bonds. Now these are the covalent bonds. These are somewhat strong bonds. That is why we discussed before, when they form atomic lattices, carbon and graphite, they have high melting point and boiling point. But here, in addition to these covalent bonds, there are these intermolecular bonds. We will see that it is given a special name. It is called hydrogen bonds. We will discuss that with extra knowledge after this. So these bonds are also somewhat strong. So because of that, now say water is a liquid at room temperature. That is because of this intermolecular bond. Now when you break the intermolecular bond, that is when you boil water, you need to break that intermolecular bond, then only it will become water vapor. So for that we need to provide lot of energy. That is why water has high boiling point. So that property is because of the intermolecular bond. So for you all students, you need to know how these intermolecular bonds are present between water molecules. You have to understand that it has to be between delta negative of one molecule and delta positive of another molecule. And here you can see the water molecules are randomly arranged with their angular shape. They are randomly arranged and there is interaction between all the water molecules. And because of that, water has special properties. One, I told you all, water is a liquid at room temperature because of this intermolecular bond. So now we will move on to the next slide where we discuss that these intermolecular forces, another name we can call it intermolecular forces or intermolecular bonds, are not as strong as the covalent bonds between the oxygen atoms and the hydrogen atoms in water molecule. When you compare with covalent bonds, these are not that strong, but still they are also somewhat strong. Yet, these intermolecular forces impart many special properties to water. That is what I told you all before. So, because of these intermolecular forces, water exists as a liquid at room temperature. That is one. Water exists as a liquid at room temperature. Then, there are some special properties possessed by water due to attractive forces among the water molecule that are follows. So what are the other special properties? I told you all one. Water has high boiling point. So one is water has high boiling point. What is the boiling point of water? You all know it is 100 degrees Celsius. That is a high boiling point because you need to break the intermolecular force or the intermolecular bond. So another property, water has high specific heat capacity. You all know what specific heat capacity is. In the first lesson, when we discussed the uses of water to biological systems or living organisms, we have discussed that. They have high specific heat capacity. The amount of heat that needs to be provided to 1 kilogram of a substance in order to increase its temperature by 1 degree Celsius is known as the specific heat capacity. And water has high specific heat capacity. So that is again due to the intermolecular force or the intermolecular bond. Water has high specific heat capacity. We have discussed the value also, 4200 joules per kilogram per Kelvin, or it can be given as 4200, the same thing. The unit can be joules per kilogram per degrees Celsius. That is also the same thing. We have discussed this before, and we will be discussing the specific heat capacity in detail again in grade 11. So for now, you all can remember that water has high specific heat capacity because of its intermolecular bond. And there is another thing. We have discussed this also. Differential expansion of water. You all can remember that term. Differential expansion of water. What is this? If you can remember, when water freezes and forms ice, ice floats on water. That is, ice has less density than water. Can you all remember that, students? So here, density of ice is less than the density of water. That is what we discussed as differential expansion of water. You all can remember that, I am sure. So those are all special properties due to this intermolecular force. One thing, water exists as liquid at room temperature. Then water has high boiling point, water has high specific heat capacity, and also it shows differential expansion. That is, density of ice is less than the density of water. So all these are because of the intermolecular forces or intermolecular bonds present in water. And that again is somewhat related to the polar nature of the covalent bond. Water is a polar molecule and it has polar covalent bonds. So that is why between the molecules there is interaction or attraction between the opposite partial charges, delta plus and delta minus. So now I am sure you can relate all these properties to the structure or the bonding that is present in water. With that, we will move on to the next slide. So there is an extra knowledge in your textbook, students. So if we look at that, the intermolecular bonds consist between water molecules are called hydrogen bonds. I told you all that before also. They are called hydrogen bonds. Now this name hydrogen bond is because in water, if you can remember, students, we had the water molecule like this, another water molecule like this, and the bond was between the partial positive charge of hydrogen and the partial negative charge that was present on oxygen. So that is why we call this hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond. These hydrogen bonds form between molecules when the positive pole of the molecule is a hydrogen atom. So here you can see the positive pole of the molecule. So this is the positive pole. This is the negative pole. Again here positive pole. And here also these are the positive poles. So when the positive pole is a hydrogen, and the negative pole. Here you can see, students, the negative pole consists of a highly electronegative atom such as fluorine. So note this term, highly electronegative atom such as fluorine, oxygen or nitrogen. So fluorine, oxygen or nitrogen. In addition to the water, hydrogen bonds are usually found in some biological molecules such as proteins, DNA and RNA. So you get hydrogen bond in water, that is the intermolecular force or intermolecular interaction or intermolecular bond that is present between the molecules of water. And because the positive pole is hydrogen and the negative pole is an electronegative atom, the interaction is somewhat strong. Not strong like covalent bond, but somewhat strong. The same type of intermolecular bond, that is hydrogen bond, can be formed when there is an HF bond or OH bond or NH bond. So because of these elements, these are the electronegative elements, fluorine, oxygen, nitrogen. So if there is an HF bond or an OH bond or an NH bond, there is a possibility of hydrogen bond. So these are present in these molecules. You can see proteins, DNA and RNA. So therefore hydrogen bond is present in these biomolecules as well. Is that clear to you all, students? So with that, I will move on to the next topic. So properties of ionic and covalent compounds. So under that, students, we are going to discuss one property by doing this activity. That is the electrical conductivity of the solutions of ionic and covalent compounds. So in this activity, we are going to use solutions of compounds, 2 ionic compounds and 2 covalent compounds, and we are going to examine and see whether they conduct electricity. So to do that, we have these materials that are necessary for the activity. Here you can see we need beakers and we need electrodes. We need 2 electrodes, and for this we will be using graphite or carbon electrode. Graphite or carbon. So we need 2 electrodes. We need a bulb to observe whether electricity is conducted. Then we need a battery. Here you can see this is a 9-volt battery. Or you can use 1.5 volt batteries, many batteries connected together, or a 9-volt battery. Then we need to have conducting wires. Conducting wires. So the 4 different solutions are salt solution, that is the common salt, NaCl. Then we need copper sulfate solution. Copper sulfate solution. That is CuSO4. Then we have sugar solution. You all know, students, sugar is sucrose. And we need distilled water. So distilled water is H2O, pure water. So out of these, you all can see sodium chloride, NaCl, is an ionic compound between Na plus and chloride ions, sodium and chloride ions. Whereas copper sulfate is an ionic compound between copper ions and sulfate ions. So that is also an solution of ionic compound. These two are solutions of ionic compounds. Then here we have covalent compound. Sucrose and distilled water, those are the covalent compounds. So using these materials, we have to try and demonstrate whether they conduct electricity or not. So to do that, what we do is we take the solution into a beaker. Into that we need to insert 2 electrodes. Before that, the electrodes have to be connected with a bulb and a battery in a complete circuit using the conducting wires. After that, we will be inserting the electrodes into the different solutions and we will check whether the bulb lights or not. And before we place this electrode from one solution into another, we have to make sure that we wash it in distilled water and dry it so that we don't contaminate the solutions. So that is the procedure. Again, I will go through the method. Here you can see the circuit is connected. So here you can see, students, we have a beaker. Inside the beaker we have the solution. We will be changing the solution in order to test the different solutions. And here we have the carbon rods. There are 2 rods, the 2 electrodes. And here you can see the wires are covered by insulators. So it's easy to handle the wires, to touch the wires and all that. One side end is connected to the electrode, then it is connected to the bulb, then to the battery and to the other electrode. And if electricity is conducted through the solution, bulb will light. If it is not conducted through the solution, then the circuit is not complete. Then the bulb will not light. That will be the observation of this activity, whether the bulb lights or not. So this is what we are going to do. Take 4 equal beakers and label them A, B, C and D. Add salt solution to A, copper sulfate solution to B, sugar solution to C and distilled water to D. So we have 4 different solutions in 4 different beakers, identical or equal beakers. Dip 2 carbon rods in each solution, complete the circuit and see whether the bulb lights. The carbon rods should be washed well before using in other solution. So this is what I told you. It has to be washed well before using it in the other solution. So a very simple activity, and also students, we have to make sure that the 2 rods do not touch each other inside the solution. Why is that? Because the carbon rods touch each other and conduct electricity, we are not sure whether the solution conducts electricity or not. That is what we are trying to find. So because of that, we have to avoid touching the 2 electrodes inside the solution or outside the solution as well. They have to be far apart. That is why in these they have a lid, so that the 2 electrodes are in their correct position. You can use it without fixing it to a lid also. Then we have to make sure we don't touch the 2 electrodes within the solution. Is that clear to you all, students? So here you have to make sure the electrodes do not touch each other inside the solution. So that is the activity. I am sure you have understood the steps of the activity. So we will do the activity in the lab now. Okay, students. So now we are going to do this activity to observe the properties of ionic compounds and covalent compounds. So here I have 4 different solutions: distilled water, sugar solution, copper sulfate and salt solution. So what we need to do is we have to have the circuit connected. So you can see that's a 9-volt battery, a small bulb is connected, and here I have 2 carbon graphite electrodes. So what I'll be doing is I'll be inserting the electrodes into the different solutions. You will have to observe what happens to the light bulb. So first we will start with distilled water. When we insert the electrodes, you have to make sure that the electrodes don't touch like this, because if it touches, you can see the bulb will light. So in that case, it will be just a circuit with the electrodes only. So we have to make sure that the electrodes don't touch, and also the electrodes don't touch the beaker, the wall of the beaker. So that is something that you have to remember. So here first I will insert it into distilled water. You can see, observe the bulb does not light. That is the observation. So after inserting into the distilled water, there's no problem. I don't have to wash the electrodes. I can insert it into the sugar solution, and all the other solutions were made with distilled water. So this is the second one. Now also you all can observe and see the bulb does not light. So the first 2 solutions, distilled water and sugar solution, the bulb did not light. Here I have distilled water to wash the electrodes, and I have to make sure they become dry before inserting into the next solution. Okay. So again, I will insert it into the copper sulfate solution. Can you all see the bulb now? The bulb is lit. So that means copper sulfate conducts electricity. So then again, I will have to wash the 2 electrodes in distilled water, and we have to dry it. So then I will insert it into the salt solution. Can you all see the light bulb? It's lit. So that means salt solution also conducts electricity. And also students, you can see near one of the graphite electrodes, you can see gas bubbles. We will be discussing electrolysis later. You are familiar with that process as well. You have learned it in grade 9. So that's because of the electrolysis. You can see there the air bubbles evolving at the graphite electrode. So from the observations, now you saw distilled water and sugar solution, the bulb did not light. So that means they don't conduct electricity. Then what do we call those solutions? Those are non-electrolytes. Then we had copper sulfate and salt solution. With those, the bulb lit. So that means copper sulfate and salt solution conduct electricity, and therefore they are electrolytes. So here we are discussing the nature of bonds. Now salt is sodium chloride, copper sulfate is between copper ions and sulfate ions. These are ionic compounds. Ionic compounds conduct electricity in the solution state, whereas sugar solution and distilled water both are covalent compounds. Water is H2O only, and you know sugar is sucrose. Both are covalent compounds and they don't conduct electricity. So here we have understood one difference between ionic compounds and covalent compounds. Ionic compounds conduct electricity in the solution state, whereas covalent compounds do not conduct electricity in any form. Okay students, so did you all observe the activity clearly? You saw that when we place the electrodes inside sodium chloride, that is salt solution, and copper sulfate solutions, the bulb lights. But when we had the electrodes inside sugar solution and distilled water, the bulb did not light. So that was the observation of the activity. So here if we fill this table under observations, common salt, the bulb lights. and sugar solution does not light. Then copper sulfate again, bulb lights, and distilled water, it does not light. So from these observations, what can you say? So from this, what can you say, students? Both the salt solution and copper sulfate solution conduct electricity. Whereas the sugar solution and distilled water do not conduct electricity. So, is that clear to you all, students? From that, what can you conclude? You know that common salt is sodium chloride. We have already written the chemical formula. Copper sulfate, CuSO4. Both these are ionic compounds. And sugar and distilled water, they are covalent compounds. So, ionic compounds conduct electricity in their aqueous state or the solution state, whereas covalent compounds do not conduct electricity in their solution state. That is what we can conclude from this activity. So, as conclusion, we can say ionic compounds conduct electricity in the solution or aqueous state. Solution state or aqueous state. But covalent compounds do not conduct electricity. Actually, they do not conduct electricity except graphite. None of the other covalent compounds conduct electricity. But ionic compounds, they don't conduct electricity in their solid state. The reason is, in the solid state, there are no mobile ions. If the ions, the charges move only, electricity will be conducted. So, in the solid state, the ions are, they are static charges, electrostatic charges. So, they can't move. Because of that, they don't conduct electricity. But in the solution state, aqueous state or the fused state or molten state, that is when they are in the liquid state, then also they can conduct electricity. So, ionic compounds in the solution state, that is aqueous, or molten or fused state, that is liquid, they conduct electricity because of the mobile ions present. You all have to remember that. But covalent compounds, except for graphite, they don't conduct electricity. So, that is what we can conclude from this activity. You saw the observations. From the observation, we know that both salt and copper sulfate solutions conduct electricity. Sugar and distilled water, they don't conduct electricity. So, from that, we came to this conclusion. I am sure you can understand that, students. With that, I will move on to the properties of ionic and covalent compounds. Before we discuss that, there is a table that is given in your textbook, the melting points and boiling points of some compounds. We will look at the values. Students, you don't have to memorize the values, but you need to have an idea as to how the values are, whether they are high or low. So in this, you have the compound, the melting point in degrees Celsius, boiling point in degrees Celsius, and the bond type. So the first one, sodium chloride, melting point 801, boiling point 1413. So obviously it's a solid at room temperature. It is an ionic bond. So there the melting point and boiling point are high. Potassium chloride, again that is an ionic compound. If I write the chemical formulae for this, you are familiar with sodium chloride, then potassium chloride, KCl, ionic compound. You can see melting point 776, boiling point 1500. So that is an ionic compound and it is a high value. Both melting and boiling points have high values. Then we have water, H2O. That is a covalent compound that you know. Melting point is 0 degrees Celsius. Boiling point is 100 degrees Celsius. Here again, students, you can remember this particular boiling point that is related to the intermolecular forces or the intermolecular bonds. We have discussed that. So here again, this is somewhat high. That is due to intermolecular bond. So although it is a covalent compound, you can see melting point is somewhat low. That is why water is a liquid, but it is a liquid because it has the intermolecular bond, and the boiling point is also high. You can remember that. Then we have ammonia, NH3. Here you can see minus 78 degrees Celsius is the melting point and boiling point is minus 33 degrees Celsius. So this is a gas. So far I told you all, this is a solid, this is a solid, that is a liquid. Ammonia is a gas because it has low melting and boiling point. So it is also a covalent compound. Then oxygen, O2, that is also a gas. You can see minus 218, minus 183. Very low melting and boiling points. That is why oxygen is a gas. That again is a covalent compound. Then we have ethyl alcohol. You know the chemical formulae of ethyl alcohol, C2H5OH. That it also has covalent compounds. You can look at the melting point, minus 117 degrees Celsius and 79 is the boiling point. This again is a liquid at room temperature. So you can see the relationship, students. When the melting point is very low, they become a liquid at room temperature. But if the boiling point is greater than the room temperature, they remain a liquid like water and ethyl alcohol. But for ammonia and oxygen, you can see even the boiling point is less. So because of that, they become a gas. And that again is a covalent compound. Then calcium oxide. We have calcium oxide, CaO, 2580. That is the melting point, and 2850 is the boiling point. Again, you can see it's an ionic compound. Ionic bonds, ionic compound, so very high melting and boiling point. Then sulfur dioxide, that is SO2, that again is a gas. Calcium oxide is a solid. So sulfur dioxide again minus 73 melting point and boiling point is minus 10 degrees Celsius. It's a covalent compound and it is a gas in the room temperature. Is that clear to you all? So look at all the compounds. Sodium chloride, solid. Potassium chloride, solid. And calcium oxide, solid. And all those three are ionic compounds. So they have very high melting and boiling points. So they exist as solids at room temperature. But if you take the other compounds, water, ethyl alcohol, they are liquids. Ammonia, oxygen and sulfur dioxide, they are gases. So they are gases, that means they have both melting point and boiling point less than that of the room temperature. That is why they are gases at room temperature. And also, you can compare and see. Ionic compounds are solids at room temperature, whereas you get solid, liquid and gaseous covalent compound. So you know some examples here: water and ethyl alcohol, liquid state covalent compounds. Ammonia, oxygen, sulfur dioxide, gaseous state covalent compounds. Like that, if you take bromine, bromine is an element, again that is a covalent compound that exists as a liquid, whereas iodine is a solid. So those are also covalent compounds. Even if you take sucrose, sugar, glucose, those are all solids. So those are solid covalent compounds. So covalent compound can be either solid, liquid or gas depending on the compound. But the ionic compounds are solids at room temperature. So here, if we look at these 2 points, melting points and boiling points of ionic compound are relatively high. Mostly they exist as solids at room temperature. The melting points and boiling points of covalent compounds are low. Generally, they are liquids or gases at room temperature. So you can look at all these properties here. Is that clear to you all, students? So with that, we will move on to some more properties, characteristics of ionic compounds. So here you can see ionic compounds are composed of oppositely charged, that is positive and negative ions. And you all know, students, the ions can be either from atoms or a molecule with an electric charge. So oppositely charged ions. Most of the compounds have solid crystalline form at room temperature. We have discussed sodium chloride, that is a crystalline solid substance at room temperature. Then they have high melting points and boiling points, that also we have discussed. And they conduct electricity in the fused or molten state and in the aqueous solution. I told you all that before. But they do not conduct electricity, in the solid state. What is the reason? Because the ions cannot move. Or in other words, you can say there are no free or mobile ions. You are familiar with these, students. You have discussed about electrolyte solutions in your previous grade also. So you know this. So they do not conduct electricity in the solid state because the ions cannot move, or there are no free or mobile ions. But in the fused and the aqueous state, they have mobile ions. So because of that, they can conduct electricity. And most of the ionic compounds are soluble in water. So you can remember, students, sodium chloride, magnesium chloride, potassium fluoride, lot of salts are dissolved in seawater. And all these salts are ionic compounds. So most of them can dissolve well in water, or they are soluble in water. Those are the properties. They are composed of oppositely charged ions. They are solid crystalline structures at room temperature. They have high melting and boiling points. They conduct electricity in the fused and aqueous state, and most of them are soluble in water. Those are the characteristics of ionic compounds. Then we have the characteristics of covalent compounds. They mostly exist as molecules composed of several atoms. So here they don't have a lattice structure except for the atomic lattices of graphite and diamond. They are molecules of several atoms. Most of the covalent compounds are in liquid or gaseous state at room temperature. So I gave you all and we discussed some examples, but you all know some substances that are covalent compounds but are in the solid state. Generally, the melting and boiling points of covalent compounds are low. So melting points and boiling points are low. Generally low. But the lattice compounds have high melting points and boiling points. So lattice compounds, you know what they are. That is carbon, graphite and diamond. Carbon, graphite and diamond. They have high melting point and boiling point. The aqueous solutions of covalent compounds do not conduct electricity. That also we saw with the activity. For example, if we take distilled water or sugar solution, glucose solution, they don't conduct electricity. That we all know. And some covalent compounds are soluble in water. Again, examples: sugar, glucose. These are covalent compounds that are soluble in water. Even you all know oxygen, carbon dioxide, chlorine, those are gases that can dissolve in water to a certain extent. Remember that, because in water there is dissolved oxygen, there is dissolved carbon dioxide, but they are covalent compounds. So some covalent compounds are soluble in water. These two dissolve well. Sugar and glucose, they are covalent compounds that can dissolve well in water. So these are the characteristics of covalent compound. Is that clear to you all, students? So with that, I will move on to the next slide where we compare the properties of ionic and covalent compounds. We have discussed this before, but again, just to recall what we have discussed so far. Ionic compounds, they are composed of cations and anions, positive and negatively charged ions. Whereas covalent compounds are composed of two or more atoms. Here ions, they are atoms. Then ionic compounds, they always have lattice structures. So another property, lattice structures. Whereas covalent compounds, they are molecules. Again, exceptions, carbon, graphite and diamond. So here, except atomic lattices. Then, ionic compounds are solid crystalline structures at room temperature, whereas covalent compounds can be solids, liquids or gases, mainly liquids or gases at room temperature. And ionic compounds have high melting and boiling points, whereas covalent compounds have low melting and boiling points. Again, the exceptions, atomic lattices of diamond and graphite, they have very high melting and boiling point. And here, they conduct electricity in the fused state and the aqueous solution. But the covalent compounds do not conduct electricity except for graphite. Graphite conducts electricity and you all know the reason why. It has a free electron. Free electron from each carbon contributes for the electrons there which help to conduct electricity. And most of the ionic compounds are soluble in water. Most of them are soluble in water, and here some are soluble in water. So these are the properties. You should know the properties separately as well as you should be able to compare the properties as well. So with that, students, I have come to the end of the lesson. So after this, I will be discussing the summary. Compounds are formed by bonding two or more atoms of different elements chemically. So it has to be 2 or more. Then they bond chemically. Elements are bonded chemically. And when forming compounds, electrons in the valence shells of atoms rearrange. That is important. Rearrangement of electrons is what gives rise to the formation of bond. So either the electrons are lost by one atom and gained by the other, so that leads to the positive and negatively charged ions, ionic compounds. Otherwise, they share. Sharing is also rearrangement. So in both instances, there is rearrangement of valence shell electrons. Positive ions are formed by the loss of electrons from an atom. Negative ions are formed by the gain of electrons by an atom. Electrostatic attractions, another term you have to remember. Electrostatic attractions between the oppositely charged ions are called ionic bonds. So between a cation and an anion, positive and negative charges of the ions. The bonds formed by sharing of electrons between pairs of atoms are named covalent compounds or covalent bonds that lead to covalent compounds. And solid crystalline ionic lattice of an ionic compound is formed by the orderly arrangement of ions in space. So when ions are arranged in an orderly manner, you can remember in sodium chloride, one sodium ion is surrounded by 6 chloride ions. One chloride ion is surrounded by 6 sodium ions. That is what they mean by orderly arrangement of ions in space. That gives rise to solid crystalline ionic lattice. Solid crystalline ionic lattice that you are familiar with. Then we move on to the next slide. An atomic lattice is created by the orderly arrangement of atoms in space. So here another type of lattice, the atomic lattice. You all can remember diamond and graphite, the two allotropes of carbon. There are many allotropes, but these two allotropes exist in the form of atomic lattices. Therefore, they have special properties. Then, according to the nature of bonding, ionic and covalent compounds show characteristic properties. That is what we discussed a while ago. A bond with partial positive and negative charges is called a polar covalent bonds. Water is a compound with polar covalent bonds, and you all know water is a polar compound. The attractive forces among the molecules are known as intermolecular forces or intermolecular bonds. So because of the intermolecular forces between water molecules, water has a lot of special properties like having high specific heat capacity or differential expansion in freezing, or else it has a high boiling point. So those are all related to the intermolecular bond. The intermolecular forces give specific characteristics to compounds. Water has special properties due to intermolecular attractions among the water molecules. So that is what I discussed now. So with that, students, I have completed the lesson. So in this lesson, we have discussed why atoms form bonds in order to attain the noble gas stable electronic configuration, or what we called as octet configuration in covalent bonding. And then based on that, the two types of bonds, ionic bonds and covalent bonds, and then we learn to write the different ionic structures, the ions and the interaction between them. Thereafter the covalent bonds, under that homoatomic molecules, heteroatomic molecules, single, double and triple bonds, and also we learn to write the different structures, Lewis dot cross diagram, Lewis dot diagram and the Lewis structure. And then we discussed atomic lattices, intermolecular bonds and the properties of ionic and covalent bonds. So with that, we have completed the lesson. In the next chapter, I will be discussing the questions from your textbook, and after that some extra questions.